Welcome to today's episode of Wolverine Fan Therapy. I'm your host, Phil Kane. Today we are going to cover, wow, what a fun weekend in college football. Lots of exciting action to recount. Michigan continues to look poised for a special run, but there are a couple of key concerns in the lack of a verifiable backup quarterback and a couple of other minor issues. Will the lack of a true backup quarterback become the Achilles heel for Michigan in 2023? Will Donovan Edwards be able to return to form at some point this season? And then, of course, we're going to look around the Big Ten Conference where, as we told you last week, it's really starting to look like a repeat of the 1970s and early 80s, back when it was the Big Two and the Little Eight. This year the Big Ten certainly looks a lot like the Big Three and the Little 11, with Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan looking like clearly the class of the conference. All right, we're going to come back and discuss all those things and much, much more on today's episode of Wolverine Fan Therapy. That's right, Wolverine Fan Therapy. We are Michigan Wolverine fans, have been for nearly 50 years. We can help you with your Wolverines obsession. We realize that as fans, passion and emotions are important, and that following Michigan sports is really just more than a game, it's really a way of life. It is all around us, like the air that we breathe. However, we need to help each other out. A little bit of therapy, group therapy, to keep our thoughts and opinions somewhat grounded in common sense. We're attempting to bring a fair and balanced approach to coverage of the Michigan Wolverines sports teams. We truly care. We are born and bred Michigan fans. We bleed maize and blue. We will provide coverage and insights with some flair, but without a lot of hyperbole. We want to be honest, but we don't need to be overly cynical and critical. We realize that these athletes are real people. They have parents, families that love them, and that they're young adults and they make mistakes. We want to be realistic and call things as we see them. We believe we can do that without being sensationalistic and or hurtful. All right. Thank you so much, Wolverine fans, for joining us. Let's get into it today. Michigan with an impressive 31-7 victory over a very plucky and hard-hitting Rutgers team that is probably about the 7th or 8th best team in the Big Ten this year. This Rutgers team is improved. They've already defeated Northwestern pretty handily, a Northwestern team that somehow pulled out an improbable overtime victory over Minnesota this week. So, not a joke, this Rutgers team, and we mean that in all sincerity. We predicted 31-17. It ended up 31-7, so we got at least the Michigan side of the score right. We get something for that. But the Rutgers was not a bad team at all, and they're going to win some Big Ten games. We think they got a really good shot to get to a bowl game this year, now sitting at 3-1. So, but like the rest of the Big Ten Conference, they're really chasing after, and there's really a gap between them and Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. And boy, did you see that on display this weekend. Penn State with just an overpowering victory at home against Iowa. We predicted that, but boy, we didn't think they'd shut them out, and it was really impressive. So, offense, defense, in all areas of the game, you can just see a clear separation between Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and the other Big Ten teams. What does that mean as the season plays out? Well, what it means is that, much like the era when I grew up in the 1970s and early 80s, where we used to refer to the Big Ten as the Big Two and the Little Eight, because Michigan and Ohio State, every year you knew that they basically were going to be undefeated when they played each other. Now, every once in a while, one of those teams would slip up and stub their toe and maybe lose a game, but for the most part, you knew one of those two teams was going to win the Big Ten Conference. That seems to be the way it is again. One of those three teams is going to win the Big Ten Conference. And that was really just the way it was in 2022. So 2022, 2023, it's those three teams really fighting it out. And you saw last year Penn State lost 2 games all year long. Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State, they really outplayed them in Happy Valley in 2022. They outgained them, but they had 4 turnovers, and that's why Ohio State won the game. So what this means, and then of course Michigan didn't lose any games in the Big Ten, and Ohio State only lost 1, and that was to Michigan. They were 11-0 each when they played each other. So what it means is that Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan should not lose any Big Ten games except to each other. All those 3 teams should be double-digit favorites by Vegas odds makers in all their remaining games, except when they play each other. So this will build incredible anticipation and intensity around the games when those 3 teams play each other. These are not only conference contenders, these are national championship contenders. Okay, Ohio State will point out, yes, they somehow pulled. We predicted the Ohio State Notre Dame game was going to be good. We had it 50-50. We gave a slight advantage to Notre Dame. Ohio State ended up winning the game on a last play of the game. They walked off with a victory in South Bend, basically saving Ryan Day's job. And you heard that in the post-game comments. I think Ryan Day knew he had just saved his job, and he was an emotional wreck after the game. And of course, you don't have to look on social media far to see the thousands of memes that are out there poking fun at Ryan Day. We won't pile on to that, but you could just see the importance of these games. And like I said, I really think Ryan Day saved his job by winning that game. And now all he needs to do is just go out and win every other game on their schedule and win the Big Ten Conference and beat Penn State and beat Michigan. Like, that's no big deal. So anyway, what this does with these 3 teams is just build anticipation for later in the season when they play each other. October 21st, Penn State at Ohio State. November 11th, Michigan at Penn State. And then November 25th, last game of the season, Ohio State at Michigan. Those 3 games are basically what the Big Ten Conference is going to be all about this year. Now, that doesn't mean that one of them can't lose, they can't stub their toe, but my feeling is that none of them should lose a game. Penn State's already won a road game, and Ohio State's already won a road game at Indiana. Look, Wisconsin probably looks like the 4th best team in the Big Ten, but Iowa, Wisconsin or Iowa is probably going to win the Big Ten West. So, but those 3 teams should be double-digit favorites in all the rest of their games, and so they're going to have to work hard and just play really poorly and make a lot of unforced errors to lose a game other than to each other. So, all right, let's get into some takeaways from the Michigan game. But before we do that, it's story time. I'm your host, Phil Kane, and I'm going to tell these stories from time to time to let you know a little bit of where my opinions come from and my perspective on college football. So I have been a Michigan fan since the early 70s, so roughly 50 years since I was a little kid. I did go to Michigan and graduate from Michigan, and I've been incredibly lucky to attend an awful lot of Michigan football games, both home and away. So I had season tickets in the Big House for a long, long time, attended a lot of games at Michigan Stadium, and still do. And I've also been to a lot of road games. I've been to see Michigan play in every Big Ten stadium except for Ohio State and Nebraska, which I will be solving that this weekend. I'll be in attendance at the Michigan-Nebraska game in Lincoln, Nebraska this weekend. So I've been to games at Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, Penn State, Michigan State, all the other Big Ten states, Indiana a few times, Purdue a few times. So I lived in Chicago for a long time, so I was lucky to go to a lot of games. So, story I want to tell today is from the 1999 season, one of my favorite seasons. I went to 10 of the 12 games that Michigan played that year. Tom Brady was a senior, and this was back before the spread offense had taken over college football. And Michigan that year with Tom Brady, when they played the 4 wide receiver set with Anthony Thomas in the backfield, they were virtually unstoppable. I think you can look up statistically, and I think they scored almost every time they had that lineup in. So the 1999 game at Penn State was a special one, not only for Michigan but for me. We rented an RV, and a bunch of us drove all the way to State College from Michigan, and enduring many bumps and bruises and snoring along the way. But it was an incredible game. The Penn State team was loaded. LeVar Arrington and Courtney Brown led their defense, and they had 2 interceptions in that game from a defensive back named Bawa Zhu, who played in the NFL. But of course, Michigan had plenty of NFL talent too. We didn't realize at the time what a distinct advantage Michigan had at quarterback. Tom Brady was Michigan's quarterback, wearing number 10, and Penn State had a quarterback named Kevin Thompson. So we had a pretty distinct advantage in the game. But Penn State was favored. It was in Happy Valley, and almost from the snap, Michigan really took it to them and outgained Penn State 411 yards to 278. But Michigan found itself trailing in the game because of 2 Tom Brady interceptions late in the fourth quarter. So, and then Michigan led under Tom Brady, led a comeback from down 27-17 to win the game 31-27. But the story I want to tell about that game was what happened at the end of the game, and then afterwards with an experience we had in the parking lot after the game. So the game ended with a strip sack by Michigan linebacker Ian Gold. He was from Belleville, local Michigan kid. Wore number 20, but he played linebacker alongside Dehaney Jones in some amazing Michigan teams. And he was a senior that year, and he ended the game with a strip sack. And then Michigan took a knee and went off with an incredible 31-27 victory over, like I said, a top 10, just loaded Penn State team. In the parking lot after the game, the friends that I was with, we were celebrating well into the night, as we all would love to do. And we happened to see a family, and somebody noticed that there was a lady, and it said something like "football mom." So we went over and started talking to her, and it happened to be Ian Gold's family. So I don't want to embarrass them too much, and have not received their permission to tell this story, but I'll never forget the conversation that we had with his family. Not only were they incredibly humble and nice people, his mother, whose name was, I believe, Celia, she couldn't believe, she seemed genuinely shocked and surprised, first of all, that we knew who her son was, and second, she was somewhat surprised that we were so excited about talking about him. And in her words, she said the words, "You really know my boy, you really like my boy? Oh, that makes me so happy." And she said it just so humbly and matter-of-factly and sincerely, and it really touched me the way she talked about that. Here's a guy who he started for the Michigan Wolverines at linebacker for 3 years. So, of course, insane fans like me and my friends, of course, we knew who he was, first of all. Second of all, she was genuinely happy to talk to us and happy that we liked him and that we were so excited, jumping around like, oh my God, he won the game. Yeah, we love him. We love your son. And we, of course, had followed his career at Michigan. So that really touched me, and it really gave me a very different perspective, one of many, many hundreds of experiences that I've had. When you actually meet players and their families, you realize this isn't a video game. These are real people. They have real stories. They maybe have aspirations to play in the NFL. I believe Ian Gold played in the NFL for a couple of seasons, but he wasn't Tom Brady. He didn't have some Hall of Fame career for 20 years in the NFL. He's not a household name. And the fact that we actually cared and were genuinely fans of not only the team but her son really touched her. And that really left an impact on me in my perspective as a Michigan fan, that these are real people with real lives, and how we treat them and the attitude that we take toward them affects them, right? I mean, it means something. You know, if we had decided to say something mean or malicious or hurtful or in any way, cynical, it would have affected it. And instead, our enthusiasm and our excitement and our joy for Michigan football and for her as her son, meant something to her. So, all right, let's get into some takeaways from the Michigan game as we hit. We're a third of the way through the season. 4 games in, Michigan's 4-0, still ranked number 2 in the country. As we've been saying, like that the team that after 9 years of under Harbaugh that has been built is really impressive. So our take on the offense, the Michigan offense, the goods and the bads, the overall performance is just damn impressive against a solid, hard-hitting Big Ten defense that Rutgers rolled out there on Saturday. They're much improved over the last few years, and they were at full strength and hitting hard. And the overall performance of the offense was really positive. Michigan played mistake-free football. Huge positive takeaway. Blake Corum is amazing. As we all know, he's playing like his old self before injury. He's an amazing guy. He's going to go down in the record books as a one of the best running backs and one of the best leaders on offense that Michigan's had in recent memory. Colston Loveland, wow. The catches that he makes, the matchup nightmare that he is truly impressive. He continues to amaze. The Roman Wilson crossing routes are virtually unstoppable. And I would say until we play Penn State or Ohio State, that seems to be without a doubt a go-to play that gets big yards. He's with his speed, and he's able to get inside the defensive back on these crossing routes. J.J. McCarthy is proven that he can hit him in stride. It seems to be one of their favorite plays and one of their go-to plays when they need a nice passing play on third down. And until we play Ohio State or Penn State, I don't see any team really being able to stop that. As long as JJ has just enough time to throw, it's amazing to watch. The J.J. McCarthy read option became a factor again against Rutgers, and when Michigan chooses to utilize it, it's wide open. Everybody knows that Michigan's a run-first team, and they're going to get a steady dose of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. And so when you saw it at least twice in the Rutgers game, when J.J. McCarthy pulls and runs the read option, it's wide open. It fooled everybody on at least 2 occasions against Rutgers. And then finally, on offense, a big positive you can't say enough about is J.J. McCarthy. He's the best quarterback that Michigan has had in the Harbaugh era. No offense to anybody else. We rooted for all of them. We love Cade McNamara. Well, he'll always have a special place in our heart. But J.J. McCarthy is the best quarterback that Michigan has had in the Harbaugh era, and he may be the best quarterback that Michigan has had since Tom Brady. So, can't say enough good about him. All right, concerns on offense, the bad. I think the biggest one that I would put up there is Michigan still has no clear option at backup quarterback. This could come back to haunt us when we play in the meat of our schedule against, Michigan State. I'll add them in there because they want to do anything they can to beat Michigan, but also just to ruin Michigan's season. And you get into those games in November, even if J.J. McCarthy's even out for just a series or a quarter, the fact that we don't really have a backup quarterback. So this is something the last couple years that we really haven't had to contend with, because you've had, in 2021, you had Cade McNamara, but you had J.J. McCarthy as the backup quarterback, even last season. And so it is a concern, and I would put it up there as my number one concern for the Michigan offense. Second, Michigan's still having issues with its tackles, Miles Hinton and Ladarius Henderson. Neither one is really looking convincing in this key role on the offensive line. You saw Miles Hinton give up a bad sack in the red zone that led to a Michigan field goal attempt, and just not gelling and not really solidifying which one of them is the key leader in that position. And so that's a concern. Donovan Edwards still, not getting a lot of room in running plays. He had a couple of nice breakouts in the passing game against Rutgers, but he's not really in midseason form, and that is concerning. You saw in a few runs with Donovan Edwards where you would have hoped he would maybe hit the hole a little faster, or cut back, and find a lane, and he wasn't able to, and 1, 2 yard, 3 yard gains that hopefully maybe later in the season could be 7, 10 yard gains or even more. Michigan did not take many deep shots down the field to the wide receivers. I heard some people talking about how, they were covered, and that's why Colston Loveland is open underneath. Yeah, yes and no. I think it was also partly just because they didn't need to. It wasn't the game plan. The singular game plan was to show Rutgers who the bully team was, and so they just chose not to throw the ball deep down the field, end zone shots, and then one of the other primary goals was to play mistake-free football and make sure JJ didn't throw any interceptions, which he did not. So let's get into the defense and then finally special teams. But defense, the good, wow, there's just so much to like about this defense. The good far outweighs the bad so far this season. And again, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan's defenses, all due respect to Iowa's defense, which is still excellent, and Minnesota's got a pretty good defense, I think. But those three teams' defenses are just a notch above. Certainly, Penn State and Michigan seem to be matching toe-to-toe with defensive performances so far this year. For Michigan, the defensive line continues to play great, even without Mason Graham this weekend. The linebackers absolutely shut down Rutgers' running game and running back. Kyle Monangai was leading the Big Ten in rushing before the Michigan game, not anymore. The adjustments made by the safeties and the linebackers after the first quarter really took away the zone read quarterback plays and quarterback runs that Rutgers was having some success with early on. Overall, this Michigan defense is special and deep at every position. We really should not be tested until the Penn State and Ohio State games. You're going to see this weekend against Nebraska, Michigan's going to have the same kind of zone read plays with the Nebraska quarterback that they've brought in, and so Michigan's going to see that again, but I just don't see any team really testing this defense until Penn State or Ohio State on the schedule. And then finally on this defense, I would say Mike Sainristil. it was really hard to emphasize enough just what he has accomplished and what he means to the team. I really am not sure if I've ever seen a more successful position switch from offense to defense in all my years of watching college football. It is extremely difficult to do. It's extremely rare that someone is successful, even at any level, to move from offense to defense. You've seen it, in Michigan's history. I'll just use Michigan. I remember one year, David Terrell, who was the best wide receiver on our team, we were thin because of an injury on cornerback, so he stepped in and tried to be a defensive back. And I think he had one interception, but overall, you're talking about playing at an elite level, and when you step in on a position switch to the other side of the ball, this isn't high school football, and you're playing against other teams where they may have NFL prospects at that position. And so for someone to make that position switch and play against extremely good or elite level talent and actually perform, it's just incredibly rare. So I was not of the mind that Mike Sainristil would be able to pull this off and be as successful as he has been. And so hats off to him, hats off to everybody involved. Not only is he achieving and excelling at this position, he's a real leader on the defense. He's become a real voice, a vocal leader on the defense, and an NFL prospect. I mean, there's a lot of people that think he's actually going to play in the NFL at the next level at this position, which is, again, I can't recall another time where I've seen that happen in major college football at the major college football level. So the bad on defense against Rutgers, really there was one bad play in the first minute where Sainristil, Rod Moore just whiffed and resulted in a long run after catch that led to Rutgers' only score. So one play in the first minute and then 59 minutes of solid defense. Another maybe bad, I would say, was Rod Moore and Makari Page looked a bit rusty. And Josh Wallace also had a couple of bad plays. Remember, he got beat on that double move in the Bowling Green game. The wide receiver dropped the ball. Otherwise, Bowling Green would have got a touchdown. And he looked like he had a couple of bad plays where he got turned around and pass interference penalty. So really hard to find a lot of bad things going on the defense for Michigan. Really just overall very impressive. Let's get to special teams. Here's maybe the one area where Michigan does have a little bit of work to do and has some cause for concern. The punt return team for Michigan this year has been a little frustrating. Look, we certainly don't have Steve Bresson or Donovan Peoples-Jones back there this year returning punts. There's no Desmond Howard that I've seen on this team. And so it's been a struggle, and it's been a little frustrating that at least one punt return in each game has just been bad and resulted in giving up 20 to 30 yards of field position. You saw it in this game where there was Rutgers was punting from deep, and we just didn't catch the punt, and then it rolled down the sidelines, ended up being a 75-yard punt. Michigan had to start a drive inside their own 10-yard line. Look, that thing, I don't care who's out there returning the punts. That stuff has to get cleaned up, okay? It looks like Tyler Morris has the potential to be a decent punt returner, but really miss A.J. Henning, who's now playing for Northwestern, who had developed into a really quality punt returner. So this has got to get cleaned up before we get into the meat of the schedule. You can't be giving up 20, 30 yards, one possession a game in a game against Penn State or Ohio State this year. And then, hey, we got to mention it, field goal kicking. Whew, we were so spoiled for the past few years. So I would say our field goal kicking is back to being just really kind of above average. James Turner's fine. He's good, and he hopefully will continue to get better as he settles down and maybe isn't nervous. But boy, we were just so spoiled with Jake Moody the last few years. So you knew it was going to come back at some point. So thanks for joining today. That's our recap of Michigan and the fourth game of the season, a victory over Rutgers. Good way to start the Big Ten season. Good way to get players back. We didn't even mention, Will Johnson returned, played. I think he led the defense with 62 snaps. Fantastic job. So overall, things look bright. We'll be back with Michigan's got 2 road games back to back coming up. Nebraska and Minnesota. I think that Minnesota will be the more difficult one, but we'll see. At Nebraska this weekend, they always get up. It's a great crowd, great atmosphere to go on the road. It's always a little difficult in a team's first road game of the year, but I expect Michigan to not have that much trouble with Nebraska. Well, more to come on that later in this week. All right, thanks for joining, Wolverine fans. Enjoy the rest of your day. And go Blue! Hey, listen, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this podcast, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. And please hit the like button. And hey, if you got something to say, please comment and share with your friends. Let's help grow our community. Wolverine Fan Therapy, we're all in this together. Let's go Blue! Yeah.